The honourable member for Surrey North.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, after hearing the Minister of Immigration, that was a rant. That wasn't really a speech full of any facts. In fact, I'm sort of wondering whether this minister has borrowed his facts from Kijiji, because we've seen that before with the Minister of Employment and a few other titles that have we in regards to the temporary foreign workers issue. But I'm going to leave that for today, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to speak to this bill because there's quite a few holes in this bill that one of my constituencies actually called that you can drive a truck through. So I'm going to try to lay it out and ask members to pay attention so that maybe there are many holes that we don't have to drive a truck, that we can make some changes that make sense in order to improve this particular bill. Mr. Speaker, again, I'm pleased to stand in this House today on behalf of my constituents from Surrey North to address the Bill C-24, the Conservative bill that intends to strengthen the Canadian Citizenship and Immigration Act. Mr. Speaker, we in the official opposition, along with many experts and Canadians from across this country, are very concerned about a number of aspects in this bill. We agree that changes to the Citizenship and Immigration Act are greatly necessary and long overdue. This Act has not been revised since 1977, and some elements of this Act create clear injustices. In addition, Mr. Speaker, Canadians continue to face ridiculously long wait times for citizenship applications. Even though some changes are necessary, this bill is another example of this government's use of power to make secretive, arbitrary decisions by cabinet ministers. I will first speak to a couple of good things in this bill, Mr. Speaker. There's not a lot because, as I pointed out, you can drive a big truck through this bill that has got so many holes. Mr. Speaker, I will be splitting my time with a member from La Pointe de l'Île. I think I pronounced that correctly. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the bill does basically a couple of things that I do agree with, and they should have been addressed a long time ago. However, we're glad that the issue of so-called lost Canadians is addressed in this bill. The NDP has fought hard for many years to get this matter resolved, the matter of lost Canadians, and finally we're happy that the Conservatives are bringing this forward under pressure from the opposition. The other positive aspect of this bill is the expedited access to citizenship for permanent residents who serve in the armed forces, which the NDP has also already supported in the last session with Bill C-25, Mr. Speaker. However, for the bill that is over 50 pages long, it completely fails to accomplish what it's supposedly intended to do. Instead of addressing the current problems, it is arbitrarily attributing more unnecessary powers to the minister, prolonging naturalization, treating many Canadians like second-class citizens, and in fact, creating more injustices. Mr. Speaker, our citizenship and immigration system is flawed, and we need a bill that actually strengthens Canadian citizenship, not one that is not even constitutional. Now, Mr. Speaker, I say that because we've heard many experts. We've heard from the Canadian Bar Association. We've heard from lawyers, and they're pointing out to the unconstitutionality of many parts of this bill, and yet the Conservatives aren't willing to hear all of that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now I point to some of the good points of this bill. Now let's take a look at some of the points that are really worrisome in this particular bill. Let's take a look at the aspect of intent to reside. Basically, under Bill C-24, it'll be a requirement that if granted citizenship, a person must declare their, and I quote this, intent to reside. The goal of this provision is to ensure Canada's expectation that new citizens live and work in a country after completing naturalization. However, this change will empower officials to speculate on a citizen's applicant's future intentions. It portrays the image of immigrants as deserving of suspicion and mistrust, and also treats naturalized immigrants as second-class citizens. The vagueness in this provision will severely create travel restrictions. International mobility will be imperative. It allows Canadians to study abroad, see their families, and become globally aware. Bill C-24, if it passes, naturalized citizens will lose this fundamental right. Citizens who travel abroad for honest reasons may face losing their citizenship because they misrepresented their intention to reside in Canada when they were granted citizenship, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Citizenship and Immigration could revoke citizenship under this pretense of fraud. There would be no appeal, Mr. Speaker, there would be no appeal, no hearing, and no public knowledge of this. Which brings me to another concern, Mr. Speaker. The next one is the powers of the minister. So this bill will grant the minister more powers. And here, take a look at another aspect of this bill. So Bill C-24 will give unnecessary powers in the hands of the minister. If passed, the minister will have the authority to grant or revoke citizenship without public knowledge or any form of judicial process. Mr. Speaker, I'm really worried about this aspect of it, is that the minister will get to decide whether or not he'll revoke somebody's citizenship. And there's no process, no hearing, and the public won't even know about this. And that's real worrisome, Mr. Speaker. So here's a quote from the Canadian Bar Association, and I'm quoting Peter Edelman, a Vancouver immigration lawyer who sits on the executive of the Canadian Bar Association, and I quote him, "What's happening here is they're proposing that citizens could lose their citizenship on a paper-based process with no hearing at all and no independent tribunal. Forget about going in front of a judge to make the decision. You may not get to speak or even see an officer." Mr. Speaker, this is clearly unconstitutional, and the Canadian Bar Association is saying this, and yet this government is not listening to some of the top lawyers in this country that point to the unconstitutionality of this power grab by Minister of Immigration. Mr. Speaker, it is not surprising. It's not surprising to me, because I've been here a number of years now, that the Conservatives are using bills to grant themselves more discretionary powers. And we've seen this in many other bills in this House where they're consolidating the power. Mr. Speaker, I see the Conservative members chirping at me, and I ask you to let them know to maybe pay attention, and maybe they'll learn one or two things and oppose this bill and actually work for Canadians rather than chirping away when another member is speaking. So, Mr. Speaker, they love power, even if it is at the cost of Canadian democracy and justice. By giving the minister these new powers, Canada is taking a step backward and opening the doors to decisions that are subjective and politically motivated. Mr. Speaker, instead of providing solutions to the issues that Canadians face every day, this government is using the legislative process to give themselves even more power, and that they already have. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, they're not worried about the process because they have so-called, not a large majority, but a small majority, and they're ramming these changes that are through. I see, Mr. Speaker, there's many other issues I can discuss. There's unconstitutionality of a number of things in this bill, and there's fees and language testing issues. But, Mr. Speaker, it seems like that only sort of consultations that Conservatives have done in drafting this bill, either they have done it among themselves or they've gone to Kijiji as they've done before. We see that this time and time again, Conservatives are not willing to take any sort of advice, neither from the opposition nor from the experts who testify before committees. Along with my NDP colleagues, I will continue to fight for a fair, efficient, transparent and accountable immigration system, and I urge the Conservatives to stop battering democracy and start listening to Canadians.
Hear, 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 hear.